Okay, welcome back, everybody. It's 2021, and surprise, surprise, we are still working from home. But luckily for us, the podcast continues for another year. Leading from home is here, and I think luckily too, because leading from home is going to be quite some time. Phil and Madeline, welcome back for a new 2021. How was Christmas, New Year, the snow? How's it all going? Madeline,
Thank you.
Land over there. How's it going?
I'm in the midst of a lot of snow. I think that you can see it in the background. It's just lovely. We didn't have any snow for Christmas, but then the snow finally came. My only challenge is that every year I tend to forget how fast the snow race really goes. And the trees are sort of coming closer and closer in a really fast pace. But I've had a lot of fun in the snow with my kids. So yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, well, before I switch to you, Phil, I think I've got to join Madeline and Snow Cam, because us in Sweden, that we complained and bitched and moaned about how dark it was in November, December, and now we've got, I think, the snow guys who answered us. So all those non-snow people, here we go. Here's some snow to also show everybody. We've got the Alps in our back garden, so there we go. Phil, there's no snow in the UK, but how are things over there? Pubs are closed, surviving lockdown.
Yeah, we're surviving lockdown. Christmas was a very quiet affair. It'll be one that doesn't stick in the memory, I guess. But it is fine. We have had one or two dustings of snow, but we're back to the usual here in the UK. But spirits are good. New year, new start, lots of energy. Looking forward to some exciting challenges ahead with you and working with you guys again.
Exactly. I say it.
Looking forward to that too.
As we always say, it's the highlight of our weeks, and at the same time, it's great to share our learnings about leading from home, because I know when we started this, Phil, you and I back in March, we thought this would be this. So let's share some insights with you, being a leading remote coach and virtual coach, that to get people through the pandemic. And here we are, almost a year later. It's become the new norm. So, and Madeline, with your team now, is, I'm guessing, the test case of how to lead a team remotely successfully. So it's good that we've stuck to the podcast, and hopefully a lot of people now have taken a lot of advice from last year, because now this year you're going to need it, because we're not going to be working from the office full time for quite some time. So even with the vaccine. So I think this year, as I said, with us planning for this year, the three of us, about some of the topics and structure, we're going to kick off this year as like a team would do normally, about planning for the year ahead. But it's going to be different, because most managers, if not all of them, are going to find themselves in a situation how to lead a team remotely, and how to set goals and objectives for the year ahead remotely. And I think that's going to be a challenge, and that's where we're going to kick off this year as a new year, in terms of new team, new year, but a very, very different situation that none of us have been in before regarding set of the year with our team. So that's the plan for today. And I think who would like to start off the process? Phil, I suppose you've been expert in this area. What's some advice to give people, starting at the very beginning, both managers who are new to remote learning and those who are adjusting versus those who are a bit more mature? What is the best practice or some good tips to get people started off?
I think the first thing to remind people of is that you will be missing one of the free gifts of proximity, which is the ability to be a fairly poor communicator, but relying on all of the people around you to fill in all the gaps. So when you're remote, the only communication that people receive is the communication from you. So if you're a poor communicator, if that message is coming across, 50, 75% clear, there's no way for people to pick up the missing 20 to 30%. So clarity of communication, I think, is one of the key things, and assuming that your colleagues are not going to be filling in the dots around you. So clarity and simplicity of the messaging for 2021 is absolutely key. And if I was going to build on that, I would be using an opportunity wherever possible to make as tangible links to your organization's key objectives as well. So, helping people see that wherever they are in the organization, at whatever level, there's a clear line of sight up to the organization's goals. This is what we've said we want to do as an organization. This is how our functions actually contributing to that. And this is how our department's contributing to that. And this is how our team's contributing to that. So give them a nice clear line of sight to, you know, give a sense of purpose behind those objectives for the year.
Thanks, Phil. Madeline, with you managing a team virtually, taking what Phil's saying, also how are you embarking this year with your team now who are working remotely, setting for this year's objectives?
Well, we had a really good recap of last year, and we sort of take outset in that one, where we summarized what happened last year and what we did good and what we do want to change and so on. And I think the interesting finding here was that we have, despite everything and despite that we do not meet every day at the office, we have become closer as a team with a lot of trust, and that we do of course want to keep. So going into 2021 and the goal setting and the objectives and so on, I think Phil has a lot of good points there in terms of that, keeping the clear line of sight and the communication that is important normally is even more important now. About this with 50 to 60%. If you can't communicate at the office, nobody's going to understand you outside the office virtually. So I think that's something that I take with me as a constant reminder and constant sort of thing to work on for myself.
Just when you mentioned there, Madeline, about reflecting from last year, there was an article that a good friend of mine, Wendy Kuhn, who I co-heard the business architecture with, she sent me an article the other week, which was titled from the Peter Drucker Forum 2020, and it's titled "Is Remote Leadership an Oxymoron? Making the Future of Work" by Stefan Grillenberg. And I had a survey of some experts about remote learning, and I find it very interesting that they had a survey about from people that said, what do you not miss about the office and workplace? And 43% of people said, I do not miss seeing my boss in person. and secondly, I do not miss the office at all. Now, just take a note that the two biggest polling things, taking that and reflecting from last year, and Phil, tying some dots together here, what does that say in terms of how difficult or how easy is it going to be to get people to, the team to align to their boss's objectives, given that, look, say, I don't know, is that saying that most people are unhappy with their boss? Or secondly, are they loving the situation of working remotely? And does that mean that their work, not work ethic, but work productivity, all these things that have been flagging out, is down? Like, how do you see, reading in that survey and also seeing how we're going to work this year, not being in the office, in terms of meeting objectives and goals compared to a normal year being in the office?
For a long time, one of the little sound bites that I've been sharing with people goes like this. As a leader, you need to point the way, you need to shape the way, and then you need to get out the way. And in many ways, if you think about it, good leadership has always been creating space for your people to excel in. But this, leading remotely, it's a default situation. You're not there. You're not in the way. I do think, that article also went to highlight that a lot of nervous leaders have created compensation mechanisms which actually result in endless Zoom calls and this whole thing of Zoom fatigue. And, as I say, if you go back to that mantra, point the way, shape the way, get out the way, focus on the stuff that your followers need. They need that direction. They need that line of sight. Shape the way. They need the rules of engagement. They need to understand, what they can and they can't do, what's okay, culturally, ethically, legally within the team that they're working with, and then just give them the freedom to be the best that they can possibly be.
Yeah. Madeline, you being a manager, do people miss not seeing you in person, or is it more like they like seeing you, but they feel nervous being next to your desk? How do you what's your reflections about being a manager not being missed and these type of things?
I think it's some scary results that you were pulling up there, Sean, honestly.
maybe it's the US. In Europe, but over here, it's we maybe probably different. Everybody loves missing their boss, but it's interesting to say that this.
In all honesty, I think it's all about leadership and the way you lead, and it doesn't matter if you are at the office or where you are. I've gotten some really poor examples of managers being very nervous now during COVID, not in my company, but that keeps on phoning their own employees when it's time to pick up the kids from daycare, because they wanted to see where they are, and that's it's not really helping. I think in terms of trust and so on, it all comes back to that. And I think I had this discussion actually yesterday with a team member of mine that I mean, in the beginning, everybody thought it was quite nice to sit from home and so on, and it kind of worked well. Now people are getting really, really tired of it and do want to have some social activity. I do think that what we talked about and discussed here before is that we will see new patterns in that when you need to be truly productive, you will sit from home. And when you need to have sort of the socialization and the meetings and the interactions, you will end up at the office. I do think that playing the part as a manager, that's not about supervising people, but to Phil's point, is about leading and showing the way and sort of removing obstacles. And when you do your job good, you're not really needed, right?
Yeah, that's if we stick on the word there, leader, Madeline and Phil, because I say I think setting the team objectives at the end of the year, those who are going to hit their objectives, and also the most importantly, have a team that is satisfied and motivated, you need to have strong leadership. And this article, going back to this article here, talks about, one of the experts in the panel talked about leading remotely is different and harder. Phil, can you be an expert here? Can you expand on that in terms of how is leading remotely, being a leader and working with a remote team different and harder than the normal situations?
Well, I think one of the points that the article makes is around biases, and we're all guilty as leaders of having team members who we enjoy the company of, we enjoy the conversation, we get energy from that engagement. And it is only natural, therefore, as a leader, that if you don't think very carefully about it, that you look back and you think, well, I'm doing a great job. I mean, I'm spending a lot of time talking to people. And actually, when you do the analysis, you realize you're spending an awful lot of time talking to a few people because you enjoy their company. But there's probably 2, 3, 4 people in the team who are being disadvantaged. Maybe they're getting nowhere near the level of time. So I think the planning, the organization, the discipline, the realization that you as a leader, you just have to accept you're going to be spending some time engaging with people who don't give you the same level of energy as some of your other team members. But that's the job, and that's the price you pay for the job that you're doing, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's one of the downfalls with Zoom. It's sometimes it's very hard to get a word in because of people that people who talk the most, generally the ones who get picked up first. Madeline, with your team, that's particularly this year when you have a team meeting to give objectives and people's feedback. How do you go around the room or the Zoom room so that everybody's heard, and how do you handle situations as a leader that dominant ones aren't always the ones talking, and the silent ones, as Phil said, are not at a disadvantage where they don't have a voice to be heard? How do you balance that as a leader remotely?
I think that's the same. I would say I act the same as if I would be in a normal room, recognizing that those that are silent maybe need some more time to reflect and think, but also to lift that up. That when we've heard the ones that are quite fast to speak up, also to recognize and just call out that, okay, so what do you think? What are your thoughts around this? And not meaning to jump on people, but if you can get an eye contact and you can sense that they are engaged, but for some reason doesn't speak up, you can do that. I really don't want to jump on people. that are sitting too quiet. But if they are too quiet, I can take that with them afterwards, just asking, is there a reason to why you were so quiet? Do you have any input, or so on? You often know the team members so well, so you know how and where they appreciate that you ask them.
I think the other thing, Madeline, that I'd really also encourage people to put their comments and thoughts and ideas down into the chat box. And almost say, right, for the next 2 minutes, everybody, just your thoughts and ideas into the chat box. Any idea goes. And even someone who may not be prepared to speak out on their idea may be prepared to actually share it in writing.
Right.
And suddenly you get those extra contributions, and even if they're not prepared to articulate them over the Zoom call or whichever technology they're using, you've got it, and you can bring it to life and say, hey, Sean, that was a really good idea there. I'd love to see that contribution. And even if they're not going to speak out about it, you've got it.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. And I suppose too, adding onto that, Phil, I know in some various memberships that I participate in with calls, using the poll, using the online polls is great because it's anonymous, so that so you don't really care. Just, did Madeline give me a 1 or 2 in terms of, is this a good idea, and did Phil give me a 5? So here's super. It's more about, okay, here's the focus areas. Which ones do you think are important to us, guys? In 5 seconds, hit the poll. And then look at the results, and then look at it as opposed, okay, these are the facts across the team. Doesn't matter who's put them. Which one's going to suit the majority of the team for us to get collectively at the end of the line? So, I don't know, Madeline, have you used much polls, and what's your feedback regarding if you're setting goals with the team and you wanted to get feedback and consensus? Is that something which you think would work well with teams being anonymous rather than normally in a whiteboard in the room show?
But I think it's a good idea, although I would like to have that level of trust so that you within the team could have a different opinion and feel secure about it.
Yeah.
So I would rather actually have that, but I think it's a great tool to work with polls. Absolutely.
Because the one thing that I've been reading about a lot during December is that creativity and innovation, that it's suffering because of, you don't have the whiteboard, and as the amount of apps are out there, it's still nothing can replace spontaneous writing and flashing out ideas on the whiteboard. Coming back to planning and new ideas and innovation being a big feature of companies, what are your both thoughts about how to negate the fall in creativity or innovation with working remotely, and what's some tips to help boost the gap? Phil, what's your experiences of remote innovation?
There's quite a lot of talk about how the remoteness is stifling creativity and stifling innovation, and then there's some recent evidence that says actually, if you look at the dynamics of what goes on in a meeting room around so-called creativity, it's far from an egalitarian process at all. Actually, it can be very much steered by certain influential individuals. So I think there are a few things about creativity. I think, again, the fact that you can anonymize it by getting people to contribute individually means that everyone can have a voice. The polls that you've suggested is another very nice way of doing it. But then getting into the practical, I'm working with a few leaders who, behind them, like you've got your picture, they've got a whiteboard now.
Yep.
They know that they need the spontaneity of a whiteboard to do their creative work. So they've actually, because they're in their office, their home office every day, they've replaced the painting with a whiteboard. And when it comes to kicking around an idea, they go to the whiteboard. They're standing up there and they're using that space in that way. So. Yeah.
So that's a really good point. So this is where I think one of the big themes about leadership is adapting to the situation. And I think as you say, improvise and adapt at home, leading from home is a good way of going about it, rather than saying, I can't do a whiteboard innovation sprint because I don't have a whiteboard. Improvise.
Maybe whiteboard will be the stand-up
tool of If
Yeah.
2021,
That's
so
it.
if 2020 was the stand-up desk, then maybe we'll pioneer the whiteboard,
I think so.
remote whiteboard.
Mm.
Actually, there's one tool that is digital, that there's like a whiteboard. It's called, I think it's called Mira. I think MIRA. I put it in the show notes of actual link, because I know here at our bank we've been doing a lot of collaboration, innovative cases with companies remotely, and we've used this tool, and it's brilliant in terms of you do post-it notes, you can put live comments. So that's one tool that has really shown. I've never heard about it up until last year, but the feedback on people using it and the deliveries of what it gives you in terms of innovation and end result has been really successful. So, but yeah, for those people who love old-fashioned post-it notes, get a board behind you and then put a camera around it, improvise. The sign of a good leader. Madeline, what are some of your ideas regarding how you're going to drum up some new ideas that normally you would be in a room with your team and have whiteboard and post-it notes? But what are some of the things that you're going to adapt and change this year in terms of getting new ideas from your team regarding this year's objectives and team goals?
I think, and that just hit me, I think the whiteboard is my thing, definitely. Yeah. And then placing the camera on it, having the team sort of virtually gathered around. And then, because it's always, I mean, if you're in a meeting room, somebody is the secretary, not everybody are standing at the whiteboard, and you can do that virtually too. So that is something that I do want to try out. So yeah.
Well, if you waited till school holidays, you could even get one of your kids to be your scribe and then say, okay, son, my team member said, put on the whiteboard, more Zoom figures, please, and they write it down. So as opposed to,
I think so.
But it's but at the same time, then
it's risky because you get a lot of interesting words up there on the,
exactly.
on the whiteboard. So.
Or maybe like your kids say, no, that's not a good comment. I'm not going to put it up, and your team becomes the. But maybe it's a bit like Simon Sinek in terms of leaders eat last. Rather than the leader being the one sitting in the room, they become the scribe in terms of, if you've got the note, okay, people, I'll write down the notes and put the posters on the board. Now, what are your ideas? And then at the end of it, like I normally do, take a photo of the board, send it out to people. So you basically replicated a physical meeting for ideas. But the only thing is the whiteboard is in one person's room as opposed to everybody. So yeah, a lot of the things that people think you can't do normally, we actually think outside the box, you actually can with the right props.
Yep.
In terms of evaluating people's progress for teams' objectives this year and how to monetize people, like this year, it's difficult because, normally in an office, people are next to you, and, you could, when you have a workshop, you can evaluate people, how they perform, and, communicate face to face. But now that most of our work is done via a document or a video, what are some of the techniques to evaluate people's progress? That performance reviews aren't going to go away for sure, definitely. So what are now some of the most important things that are going to be facing people's criteria of evaluation and performance? Madeline, who wants to kick this off?
I just want to make a passing reference to the UK government's approach to assessing exams last year. They decided on an algorithm. And it was a complete and utter failure. So they went back to teacher assessments. I suppose there's a clue there, isn't there? I think, you will have a lot less, far fewer insights, far fewer contacts with your people than normal. But go on, reach out to the customers, reach out to the clients, reach out. I think, the way it happens effectively now is you have to do your due diligence. And, if you want to be as objective as you possibly can, you need as many insights. It's work, but there's no shortcut to it. But I would certainly reach out to the customers, or the clients that the people are interfacing with. Make it simple. Again, you could create a survey around it, and so that it's standardized. And although the answers are out of scale of 1 to 10, you can then at least create some kind of measure one to another, and that would be what I'd be advising, particularly as if you're in an organization where maybe because of performance, the bonuses aren't going to be what they were. You know, if you're going to have a difficult conversation with someone who was expecting X and they're going to get 50% of X, they'll want to understand why. And it's not, well, you know, the business is going through tough times. Yeah, I know, but I had a brilliant year.
Yeah.
But you know, when a lot of people went the extra mile in 2020, how do you then give them as fair and as an objective a piece of feedback? I think it's do your homework.
Yeah.
And I agree. I completely agree to that. I think the key here is somewhere, I mean, cycling back a little bit to what you said previously about communication, the continuous feedback and the feedback loops, having that even tighter than before. I mean, can't we see each other in the office? We got like small pieces of feedback by the coffee machine and got a hint of what was good and what could be done better. But now we actually have to be proactive in that part and maybe sort of just bake it into the process. So just having a checkpoint quite regularly with the key stakeholders. So how am I doing and what could I do better? Yeah. And that should, in all fairness, be everybody's responsibility. Not me as a manager checking up, but you as an individual.
Yeah. Well, I suppose like this year comes back to, nature, survival of the of those who adapt the best. They're the ones who are going to thrive, rather than moaning about, oh, this is so tough working from home and when's this going to end, which was a lot of the comment from last year. Is that okay? This year is that it's not going to go away anytime soon, and these are that remote working is going to stay around. So adapt, look for new ways to perform and to work as a team, and those ones who do it the best are going to be the ones who succeed the most.
One of the things that I was picking up in some of my reading is rituals, and given, as you say, that leading from home, leading remotely is the default situation, probably going to be for the best part of this year. Does your team have new rituals? Do you start each team meeting with some form of ritual, whether it's a catch up with what happened at the weekend? Is it a ritual about what are the plans for the forthcoming weekend? Whatever it is, it doesn't really matter what the rituals are, but are you establishing new rituals for the team? Because I think that, combined with also some key messages, some sound bites, for want of a better description. It's not just about what you want people to do in 2021, but how do you want them to be? And part of that is going to be through the messaging. So get some community. And there's a lovely article in the book I've been reading called The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. The great story about Danny Meyer's restaurants in the US, and how the real high class performances that he gets week in and week out from his staff are driven by these very simple messages that almost sound childlike, but are essentially reinforcing the behaviors that he wants people to demonstrate day in, day out, week in, week out.
Do you have an example of one of those messages?
It's something around there like the customer is king, and it's almost as cliched as that. But and you say, oh, for really, the customer is king. But the thing is, they mean it, and like all of these sound bites, they can sound very cliched, or they can just be the way you do things around here. And so if I can dig out a couple of examples, I will do, Madeline. You and Sean talk for 2 minutes whilst I find an example.
I actually bought the same book too, Phil, over my Christmas readings, The Culture Code. So I haven't actually dived into that one just yet. Those other ones I've been doing regarding cycling, but that's on my list of. I think with culture being such a big thing this year, particularly with as I said. Adapting to new habits, new ways of working, it's going to reshape how organizations perform, and as well as not perform. And Madeline, I suppose on culture, like how are you seeing things in your organization that now people are all dispersed back at their home and remotely? Are you seeing a change in culture, and how successful are you seeing people working remotely or not successful? What's the reflection from last year?
Well, I think that we had an advantage in my company because we are a pan-Nordic company, so we are used to the cross collaboration and virtual environment. So
Yep.
I think from the beginning it was more like, missing the colleagues and the socialness. I think what we're going to see more of, this is just my own prediction, is that maybe some of the mental health that we need to, I mean, people have been at home now for close to a year, and of course that's going to take effect, not seeing other people. So I think that is something that we as leaders need to be probably aware of going into the spring. And I don't think that we're going to come back to the offices anytime before summer, in all fairness. So I think culture-wise, delivery-wise, it's above expectations, but I think it's just a thing that we as leaders need to be observant for, that the health of and just take care of each other.
I think that's a really strong point there, which I think we can use for next week's session too. About we're going to next podcast is about how to lead a high performing team remotely, and I think we talked about it a few times last year, but the mental health and also just the well-being of the employee is super important, because everybody lives in a house. Some people live alone, and the longer these remotes or working remotely, some people are going to suffer personally, regardless of how clear your objectives are. So I think I'll spend some time on that next week, because that's a super important soft skill that leaders need to be aware of, as well as how to improve and support, which I've got some things to share from my program that I did last year as well. So because we've come out of time, the first episode of 21 has come to an end, and us, Madeline and I, are going to be going skiing the weekend with our snow. But Phil, with the pubs closed, what's on your cards for the weekend, given there's not much to do in the UK at the moment?
No, we're expecting flooding here, so it'll be a walk through the mud. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you for asking.
Well, we'll send you some photos from our snow fights and skiing over here. So Phil, let's look forward to next week. Let's be positive, and we'll have a lot to talk about next week.
You got it.
In the ski fields.
You got it. Good.
You can't even travel. So thanks, guys. It's been a super good way to start 2021 as usual, and let's look forward to next week regarding focusing on how to lead a high-performing team remotely. Have a nice weekend.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.